What's up? It's Johnny King on the Johnny King Show, and I could not be more excited because I have here in the studio, aka my house, sitting on the couch, is my best man.
Best?
Best man.
All right.
I
Well,
guess
when
I'm
you
getting
get married, I'm there, dude.
Yeah, I guess I'm getting married.
Yeah.
Well,
Thanks for the honor. I appreciate
yeah,
that.
exactly. I'm inviting you to be my best man. One of my best buddies, Dan Meinerz. Thanks for being here, brother.
Hey, man. Good to be here.
And we've got
Yeah.
his friendly dog.
Faithful
there.
companion.
Right there.
The Wook.
If you're watching the video, you just got a quick view of the dog here, the sweetest dog ever, Wookie,
That's right.
our
That's
mascot.
Right. You know, it was, by the way, 3 years yesterday that he got kidnapped or dog napped in my car.
Oh, that's
Remember
right.
that story? Yeah,
That's
that was
right.
3 years ago yesterday.
Someone stole your car.
Yeah.
With him in it.
Someone stole my vehicle. It was summertime, blazing 90-degree weather.
Yeah.
I pulled up to a coffee shop in the middle of the day to grab an iced coffee. I left the car running out front with the air conditioning on. And yeah, somebody nabbed the car within a minute. And long story short, the police found, they pulled over this guy and his girlfriend who had loaded the car up with all their stuff heading for the New Mexico border. And they had tampered with the plates, and that's how they got pulled over. And miraculously, both he and the car were returned. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, just crazy, man.
That was 3 years ago yesterday.
That was 3 years ago yesterday. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
glad you're still here with us, buddy.
He's a miracle dog, man. Yeah. He's a miracle dog.
Yeah.
Yep.
Super sweet dog. Well, we met via,
via a taco date. Taco bro date.
Taco bro date.
Yeah. Yeah, we met through a mutual buddy and
eating burritos.
Burrito bowls. And I think I specifically remember just being able to connect with you just at at a kind of like a deeper level right away. I think
version.
Yeah, there was like something that was there, like it was like this twinkle in your eye that definitely got me stirred up inside, and all sorts of funny feelings going on.
Oh man!
But no, it's interesting. Kind of like, but in a real sense, it's like when you meet people in your life, and you just know there's like a certain vibration or certain like feeling that you're like, I can allow myself to just be myself, and I think we were just cracking jokes and just being stupid right away. And sometimes you pull up the barrier when you first meet somebody, and you think you have to like kind of like use your filter and feel people out.
Right.
And I think with you and I, for example, it was just kind of like this, on the same page. We had a lot in common. Seemed like we had some like past history stuff that we spoke about. One thing being like personal development, personal growth was one of our key interests. And so I think it's like anytime you meet somebody, especially I think with friendships with men, I found it in the past, there can be some barriers.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I've experienced that too, where you may be meeting someone, but may even like, I even get that feeling sometimes just by like being on dating apps, for instance. Like I'll just be swiping, as crappy as that is the world we live in today. But I'll swipe to someone and I'll be like, just even something about her energy in her pictures. I'm like, I don't know. And then I meet them. I'm like, sure as hell, like there's something special and unique about them. And it's, I think you just had me at hello.
Yeah. had you at intuition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not to mention you went straight into the perverted jokes, and I was like,
that's always the icebreaker, right? I think that's always the bro code, if you will, to how much can you try to offend or gross out, the other guy, to see like when's he's going to tap out.
It's a shit test.
Yeah, definitely.
Version
and you passed it in flying colors.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
and here we are.
3 years later, or such. Yeah,
something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you joining me. If you're watching the video of this podcast, it's just nights ago and several weeks ago, and we were sitting here kind of doing the same thing, just not recording it. So that's what I love about this podcast, because I do feel like there's oftentimes that whether it be women or other guys, it's like, man, if I could be a fly on the wall of these types of conversations. And I think a lot of people are, well, they're just surprised that men have these types of conversations. Not maybe this type of conversation, but
Yeah.
a conversation that can go from laughter and stupidity and perversion and hilarity to depth.
Yeah.
And I think that's the type of guys that we are and that we attract into our lives. So why don't you give a little bit of background of just who you are and your life story and the education you've gotten and shamanism, which is kind of unique. I don't have too many other guys that have done that type of work. And
yeah. So gosh, man, the brief summary, if you will, I went to college, had a business degree in marketing, and right out of college, I moved to LA, got the big city experience, and quickly got burnt out from the energy of it, like just overwhelming people and the busyness of Los Angeles when I moved to LA. Yeah, so it was an experience, a good experience to have, the big city life and the hustle and bustle. And I quickly moved back to Denver and found one of my callings of connecting with people and going to the bars, and like doing that thing was my calling back then. So I became a nightclub promoter, and basically was in that industry from nightclub to working for different beverage brands. So working with Coors at one point, working with Red Bull at one point, and it was all about being social, connecting with people, having conversations. And interesting, alcohol was such a focal point of that. Like for many people, it's very social. And then I kind of woke up one day and started asking myself questions like, is this what I really want long term after a decade of that? And I started really tapping into more of like spirituality, doing yoga, doing meditation. I dated a yoga instructor. I mean, if you want to get woke, that's certainly one way to do it. They kind of bust you open. And, for me, it was really starting to go down that path where then I kept hearing the word, shaman, and shamanism. And it was just something that piqued my interest. I really didn't know what that was. I thought it was just like, a dude that shakes a rattle and, dances around a fire and like touch your healed Jesus type of thing. Right.
Yeah. Right.
And I didn't know. And I had introduced me to a workshop back in circa 2011, 2012.
Okay.
And it was on Peruvian shamanism. And so I'm like, okay, what's this about? And really that, to me, that was the introduction to personal growth. They talk about the medicine wheel, and there's 4 directions of the medicine wheel. So anytime you see like the 4 directions, like in a lot of even like Native American art or any indigenous art, they use the cross or the medicine wheel as a way to start to go into directions of personal growth. So like the south direction is where you start. It's about breaking free of your patterns, identifying limiting beliefs, shedding your skin, shedding the past. And then the west direction is about like really going into the internal part of who you are, and like starting to let go of like toxicity. So it can be physical toxicity, it could be mental toxicity. So the purge. And then as you go into the north, it's about tapping into your passion. Like, what are your gifts? Who are you really? Like, what are you really here to bring to the planet? And not just checking the box off of like having a job. And then the east direction is like where you complete the wheel, where it's all about vision and being clear on the path that you're intending to set forth, and like creating your reality, living in the future. So yeah, that was all kind of part of the stepping into that shamanism and what that's about. And then and what ensued after that was like because my life was pretty good. I'd say really sensing into, I don't really have a lot of issues, except for I was like dealing with some anxiety, depression for years, but it wasn't like debilitating. It was just kind of annoying.
Yeah.
And then I think anytime, like, well, my experience and what I've witnessed from others is like anytime you kind of start that path of personal growth, it is like the call to more, right? So there's almost like, if you really want to change yourself, you want to have transformation, at some point the bottom's going to fall out. And for me, it did, because that's when I quit my job. I just couldn't handle the corporate world anymore.
Yeah.
I uh, I lost a relationship. It just kind of, living girlfriend just kind of totally shattered. I found myself, in a corporate position, making like $80K a year with benefits and an expense card, like running cards for, dinners and everything, to, gosh, I mean, at one point living at home with my parents at 35 years old with debilitating depression and anxiety. And around that time, gosh, like we met a couple years ago. So there's a path of like going into men's work, doing men's group, going to like counseling, all that kind of stuff. And then when we met was really a pinnacle of personal growth, because Johnny introduced me to Psi seminars, or PSI. And that's where it really took my personal growth to the next level, as far as taking a really deep look at an inventory, if you will. It's like they talk about life success, life inventory of what's working, what's not. And I'd say that was a huge catalyst for me breaking through of my bullshit, and taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting, like starting the path of the shamanism practice and then going into personal growth with groups and seminar work. It just became a passion of mine to like continue to pursue what the path is.
It's if you've been listening to any of my other podcasts, I think it's not surprising how much Dan and I have in common, because what he just talked as his journey was like, yeah, that was pretty much my journey too. We have a lot in that sense. And I think I met you shortly after, even I just had my first introduction into shamanism, which I did like a 4 or 5 day course. I don't know if we've gone into this too much, but I did down in Brazil, through a Tony Robbins week-long adventure, and we were doing it like right in the Amazon jungle. And
yeah, you never told me that.
Yeah, I did. I don't think I ever did. But I'm saying, we were given the option of either doing like 4 or 5 days with a Green Beret, learning outdoor adventure or outdoor survival skills, or learning from this the guitar expert who could teach you how to play the guitar in a non-traditional way, in like so that you were pretty decent within 4 or 5 days. Or you could learn shamanism, and I knew I could do the other two pretty easily, but to be in the Amazon, and to take that on was going to be a lot more out of my comfort zone. And I've always been eager to learn more about spirituality and things like that. But it was quite the introduction, because I literally went into a group of like, I guess maybe there's 60 of us, with this woman, and I guess there were a couple of different teachers who would come in and rattle their stuff and do different blessings and smudge the room and do all this stuff. And I was just kind of like, what the hell? And then other people were like being possessed, and like I was like, I'm supposed to be like with my eyes closed having this journey, and I just have like one eye open, like, oh, what is going on here, but there was part of that is like, I liked the opportunity of being totally out of my comfort zone, surrendering to an experience that's like gonna certainly stretch me, where the other two were within my wheelhouse. And so that was quite the experience. And not that we did any type of ayahuasca or anything like that, but it was quite, it was a very interesting, and I had some very cool journeys and some really cool visualization stuff, without even being under the influence of any type of psychedelics or anything like that. And that definitely piqued my interest when you first brought it up. I'm like, oh, I think that, again, a lot of our stories kind of coincide in different ways,
Right.
So that's pretty dope. So now you find yourself doing what in your life? Not only doing what, but like, what are you in search of? Where do you feel like you are as a man?
Yeah, and I think that's where our paths cross again. I'd say that, we grew up in a generation of men who have a hard time having the conversation, a hard time of opening up, being vulnerable, maybe having the ego to have a sense of being strong, of having something to prove. And I think that's just, a generation passing down to generation. And so, one of my passions is kind of being showing up as a leader
Mm-hmm.
in the movement towards a healthier masculine,
Mm-hmm.
and how do we start to co-create the new future of how we show up as men,
Mm-hmm.
empowering each other, empowering our communities in a way that we are actually showing up fully, like as heart-centered men who
Mm-hmm.
are compassionate, who are caring, who can show the love and vulnerability to our partners, to our families. And it's letting go of that shedding that ego, shedding societal dialogue or norm of how we're supposed to show up, and the even the roles that we take as providers, and having to be strong and not show emotion. So it's really just breaking up a lot of these stigmas and a lot of patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily like we need to agree on what it is to be a man. Like we write it down on paper and we sign it and say this is what it's meant to be. But it's more just, how do we, just like anything else, like even in the topics today of race and diversity, it's like, how can we all show up as human beings, or as men, or
Mm-hmm.
like agreeing on what the new, I guess, like energetic way of showing up, so that we all can celebrate our diversity, celebrate our differences, and
Yeah.
acknowledge
Yeah.
that we all have different backgrounds, and at the same time, like we all want the same things, like at
Mm-hmm.
heart, like we all want love, like we
Mm-hmm.
all want connection, and we all
Exactly.
want equality to a sense. So it's those are things that are inherent in our humanness. And so for me, it's continuing that path of that pursuit,
Mm-hmm.
and I think with men for is just, and I know we share that. I think that's just kind of the part that really is my driver, because I've experienced it, and then doing men's work and connecting with guys like you, just to see how toxic masculinity, or how we've been shaped through the immature masculine, or the
Yeah.
tyranny, like the tyrant king. If we're looking at archetypes, we can be a victim to that, and it's not necessarily a conscious thing. It's more of a unconscious thing.
Yeah. And I feel like that's probably what drives a lot of our similar interests too, is that we've seen it within ourselves, we've seen it within each other,
Yeah.
of when we haven't gotten it right,
Hmm.
and what it looks like to experience life kind of from the shadow side, the not so light side of masculinity,
Yeah.
and how that's wreaked havoc on physical, mental, um, health, relational health,
Hmm.
financial health, everything.
Yeah.
It's very pervasive when it's not in alignment. And yet, in those times I'll speak for myself, in those times where I have felt like I've been able to really get in the flow and start to be very clear about what journey I'm on, and to push aside all the distractions and the temptations. Man, I find so much flow and things happening without much effort, which is kind of like, oh, it doesn't have to actually be this hard. It's difficult because for me personally, I didn't have that great sense of like, this is how to be a man
Right.
type example growing up.
Yeah.
So I've had to figure it out
Yeah.
over the last 10, 15 years.
Hmm.
So I don't know if that's been similar to you, but
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I think a lot of it comes from men seeking. Like we're seekers,
yeah,
right? We're hunters
yeah,
at heart, right?
yeah.
So, for me, it was like, what books can I pick up
Mm-hmm,
on, how to be a man?
mm-hmm,
There's so many
mm-hmm,
that are out there that talk about masculinity and what it is to be the modern man.
mm-hmm,
And, there in theory, like there's all a great information out there, right?
mm-hmm,
And one can sit down and educate, um, and do the research and go online. But for me, in my experience, like the rubber doesn't hit the road until you actually start like the conversation, unless you start the interaction. So, um, I know you and I share the passion for men's work, and men's work isn't so much, I don't know like how you would even define that. For me, I would define it as a way for men to connect, and to support and hold each other accountable for our actions.
right.
So for example, I mean, it's, we can have all the best in the world. However, if we're doing it by ourselves, and that's so many men who, in my experience, especially I can speak for myself, where we tend to say like, I'm strong enough to do this on my own. I mean, I'm capable of doing it on mine. I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders.
Yeah.
And that can only carry you so far. And just as anything else, like when you work as a team, as you work in community, you can go so much further when you have the support of a brother, and you have someone say, hey, like, did you go on that mountain bike ride that we talked about last time we got together? And because then it's like, not to shame a man if he didn't do what he said he was going to do, more about like, hey, like, I'm supporting you because you said this one thing was important to you. And did you do it? And if you didn't, then it's almost digging a little bit deeper, asking the question of like, well, what showed up for you? And a lot of times we have our excuses, we have our reasonings, and underneath is the shadow.
Right.
And we can identify, okay, well, gosh, like if we can identify the shadow, maybe we can bring some light so that we can push through that, so we can start really moving into that vision of who we want to become. We actually start living the life that we say we're going to live through our actions. Right.
I was going to say too, it makes me think of, there's the book Wild at Heart by John Eldredge, and he talks about how masculinity can only be bestowed by the masculine. And I've said this in past podcasts and on different type of social media posts and things like that. It has resonated because for me to, he talks about in the book how oftentimes the shadow side of the masculine will take his big question, which is like, am I enough? Am I man enough? And he takes it to the feminine, because most of us have been raised by the feminine, and the feminine can't answer that question for us. And I remember it being like, especially in college, I was extremely competitive in playing, multiple sports, and like I would have, these various soccer games, which my mom rarely ever missed a game. She would travel hours to come to watch my collegiate games and stuff like that. And I just remember some games in particular, I would have had a horrible game. And of course, mom is always there like, sweetie, you did such a good job. You ran so fast. Like the bar of like pride or,
right,
that sort of thing for a mom is like the fact that you just kicked the ball. You could be 3 years old and she'd be like, yay.
You can do no wrong.
No, exactly.
You're mama's boy.
When in my mind, I'm like, I just had a really shitty game.
Yeah.
And we're in those moments, she was like, no, sweetheart, you did really well. Like you played really great. I'd be like, I didn't want to hear it, because I didn't, it's almost like even if I had a good game and she told me I had a great game, there's part of me that wouldn't believe it, or just wasn't fulfilling for me, versus my coach, who would either challenge me when I had crappy games, go back and look at game tape, or he'd say like, hey dude, you played really well. It meant so much more to me in certain situations. Not that my mom's, blessing and love and that sort of thing didn't, resonate, because it certainly did. But there came a time like I was yearning for more of that masculine mentorship and appreciation, and yet I very rarely got it. So I kept on going. I found myself, whether it be my mom or women, girlfriends, I should say, intimate partners, or just friends, teachers, like I kept on looking to them for that validation. Am I enough? And I could never find it there. And it took me the better part of my adult life now to figure out that that's just not an answer I should be taking to the woman, to the feminine.
Dude, you're absolutely right. And I really resonate with that, because I definitely found in my journey that, through my healing and through my path to better self-understanding, I always gravitated towards women, as far as women therapists, coaches. I found myself, before I do really doing personal development work, like needing the validation or needing this from women. And I'd say like, and how that showed up in relationships was showing up as a man who was wounded and in the sense that I felt broken. And like, I now know that like none of us are broken. We just have wounds that we need to focus on healing. Yeah. And like I'd find myself in relationships where, you know, getting super deep, getting super connected, getting super vulnerable, and also like sharing my shit, you know, sharing like, you know, here's where I'm insecure, and here's all these things, and learning after quite a few relationships that, gosh, like I just dumped like all this on my partner.
Yeah.
And that's not unhealthy. That's a very unhealthy thing to do, that I
Yeah.
learned. You know, it's one thing to like, yeah, be open, be vulnerable, and then you can share yourself. But like that needed to be with more of a coach or therapist. And it was almost like I was needing the validation to just say like, you know, here's my deepest wounds. Can you make me feel better through love? And that love can be through, you know, this sense of having a partnership. It can even be through sex.
Yep.
You know, and I think that where, in my experience, that I've even kind of like, I guess my judgment of other men's experiences, where when we come wounded, we don't come with a sense of fulfillment or self-love, we're really not coming fully into a relationship.
Right.
And I'd say with all of this, really a lot of my path had come to right before I met you. I was in a relationship, and it was doing the same thing. It's just that same pattern, that cycle of, I was entering a relationship where I was not full in my heart, and I was feeling broken. I was feeling lost and depressed and all these things. And I was really dumping that on her. And, you know, she's telling me, oh, you're great and you're a great guy. And, you know, but nobody, you know, nobody can believe that except myself, until I can really find that place of acceptance. And then finally she told me we were breaking up. She was just like, you know, I can see like, you know, the man that you are, and you're a great guy. You don't believe it, which is unfortunate. And like, you're never going to have a successful relationship until you love yourself. And it wasn't like, not going to get in a relationship until you love yourself. It wasn't, it was very endearing. Right.
Yeah.
And then, that's when I came to a place in my path where I was like, man, like all this depression, all this anxiety, all this not enough talk was not only of like not loving myself, but it was also like a self-loathing, a self-hatred, and like deep shame for, I guess just maybe just existing, which is weird, right? I wonder how many other men experience that. And then literally 3 months later, I think is when I met you, 2 or 3 months later, and you introduced me to, you know, to the side work. And that's all about self-love. That's all about like taking acceptance of it all. And so, I think when it comes to it, like when we start to have the conversations too, like you mentioned earlier, and like the talk about, like even guys getting together and why it's important to get together. And with the absence of the feminine or the women, because I actually had a friend, we were talking about this yesterday, a woman, and she was like, wait, so what's men's work about? I'm like, why don't you guys have females there, you know? And I kind of got stunted there for a second. I was like coming up with excuses, because she's like, she made some good points as far as, you know, why can't you just be open and all these things? And it's more just like, because we can bounce back. Because I know like in our conversations, we can get like immature at times, and then crack a joke of like maybe something that's toxic masculinity or like bro talk, but we catch ourselves and we don't mean it, but then like we challenge ourselves, like, dude, why are we saying this? Like, is that what we really want? Is that what we really want to say? And, you know, if we don't have, I think if we don't have the absence of the feminine there, to fear the judgment, to fear like if we falter in our conversation and we falter within like, are we saying the right thing or not saying the right thing? It almost like it's become this like experiential conversation that we're allowed to fuck up, allowed to be ourselves in our full manhood and our masculinity. But then like it takes the courage, and I'd say like a sense of enough awareness, so that like, you know, you may say something and I might be like, yeah, let me challenge you a little bit, as you do to me. Because it's not about us stroking our egos and saying like, hey, like, dude, you're totally right. You know, like you were totally right in that relationship. You know, she's the one that messed up.
Right.
It's more like, and I know recently you told me about the relationship I was currently in. You really, out of anybody I talked to, you challenged me on like my thought process and what was showing up. And I appreciated that. And I think that's where as we grow into our relationships and our brotherhood,
Yeah.
that's what we need. We don't need the affirmation to going back to like us feeling better about ourselves
Yeah.
and about acknowledgement and feeling enough. Like that, those are great, but it's the next level challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what the feminine does. And it's what's so beautiful. I mean, none of us would be here. None of us would be here with the selflessness of the feminine, which is oftentimes putting the needs of others ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. It's a
Mhm.
double-edged sword, though. I mean, my mom passed away because she put the needs of her 5 children and everyone else ahead of her, and her health failed her,
Yeah.
because her way of then kind of like rewarding herself after a day of constantly giving to others, she was giving to herself through late night eating, right?
Mhm.
And so the feminine, there's that double-edged sword, and there's certainly a double-edged sword. It's probably, like we said, the light and the dark. Call it double-edged sword to the masculine and the feminine. But I feel like, to me, and I've gotten those questions too, a lot of times it's like, what, since I'm doing a lot of men's only meetings every single month and men's only events, like why aren't women allowed to be there? And because I feel like, though, the feminine, and don't get me wrong, the feminine is not just women. There's certainly men that are in my men's groups who are to their core more feminine than they are masculine,
Sure.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet they identify themselves as men, and if that's if that's the case, then they're more than welcome to be there. But ultimately, I feel like the feminine, a lot of times, for me, is such a safety net.
Mm.
And it was like, because I know that no matter, like, whether I have a great game or a bad game, my mom, being in her feminine, would be like, I love you regardless,
Yeah.
right? No
Mm-hmm.
matter what, I don't need you to it's unconditional in that sense. Like,
Totally.
you don't have to,
Yeah.
I don't have to challenge you to
Mm-hmm.
be any better, any of that stuff. And yet then there's the other flip side of the coin is, I think all of us, men and women, just human nature is that we always want to improve, that if we're not growing, then we're dying. So there's
Right.
that need for both unconditional love for who we are right now, but also then the challenge to be better.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, for me, since most of us men have had more steady, let's say, feminine or female people in our lives to keep us in check and to raise us and everything else,
Mm-hmm.
um, to have women in the room sometimes, it makes it all that more easy to fall back into old behavior
Yeah.
and to not be challenged. And a lot of times men just change their behaviors when there's a woman in the room.
I was just gonna say the other thing. Yeah, that's the other part. Like, let's be honest. Like, we're still primal at heart,
Yeah.
and if we're distracted by an attractive woman,
Yeah.
or even the female energy, we're not present.
Right.
Like, we're probably thinking about animalistic sex. Like, we're thinking like, maybe I should say something a little bit different
Right.
to, look a little bit stronger like a man to attract this woman. And that's subconscious.
Totally.
That's not a conscious thing. Again, it goes back to our primal instinct.
It's distracting.
Yeah. And it's totally distracting. And I think one thing you said really reminded me of a story that I believe is in the book King Warrior Magician Lover.
Yeah.
And it's about the 4 archetypes of the masculine.
Yeah.
And they talked about the way that men used to have a rite of passage, right? And in, I guess, the historical sense or even the tribal sense, rite of passage would be men that are literally, or boys that are taken away from the mothers in the village, in a sense, by the men in the village during the middle of the night. It's not planned.
Mm-hmm.
And these boys are literally taken on a journey to go survive out in the wilderness, to learn how to hunt, to learn how to survive,
Mm-hmm.
to literally learn from the men in the tribe how to become men.
Mm-hmm.
And it's through that fear of being torn away from their mothers, which is, again, that comfort zone, that safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's sensing that separation and that fear, not knowing what's going to happen, and being put through the trials and the tests. And after the amount of time that they're gone, whether it's weeks or a month, whatever, again, duration it is, they come back having learned what it is to survive in that, or to grow from that experience.
Yeah.
As a fully capable men. And like, now we have, we don't have that rite of passage in our culture. A lot of times it's like, oh, you graduated college, you're a man. You go to the military, you get a job.
Yeah.
Gang initiations, right? There's a lot of different ways, but we still don't have,
not even quite like women do, which
right,
is, you have your first period and, well, you're now a woman.
Yeah.
Like that is your kind of rite of passage
Mm-hmm.
for women, I feel like, and men don't necessarily have that so much. I mean, I wasn't even talked to or told about sex or masturbating or any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Puberty.
Right.
I just was like, what the hell is going on with me?
Yeah.
Little horn dog.
Yeah.
you
Like
know
what's this feeling I got going down here?
yeah,
What do I do with it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that is the case, and there's multiple other angles for why I feel like men's work is so important, because there is something, just as women could probably say, there's something truly special about women's work.
Mm-hmm.
Women just supporting each other, having girls nights or retreats,
Mm-hmm.
vacations just with women is
Mm-hmm.
it's just different than if there were men there, and it's the
Yeah.
same way. And it's not to say that we don't honor and cherish the feminine and women in our lives. We absolutely do. It's just one of those things that it's not as effective with the feminine presence, because I believe there's nothing more powerful than a woman fully in her feminine, because we could be the most alpha of alpha guys
Mm-hmm.
and have that fully feminine woman in her in her presence and in her strength walk through, and we could be watching ESPN, or we'd all be like, it just is captivating.
Sure.
And that's the hard part, to stay focused on the healing work when the feminine is present, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. And I think I think what in my observation of it all is the the men are kind of late to the party
Kinda.
in this scenario, right? I
Yeah,
think
centuries.
and it's almost like in my mind, it's not until you're oppressed and to the limit
Mhm.
where then you start getting angry and you start speaking up and you start pushing back.
Do you think that's what's going on?
To me, that's what I experienced, because I mean, you even now with everything going on with Black Lives Matter, and you have a lot of um, the so like the movements back in the 60s, and you have Martin Luther King, and you have even the women's rights movements. So it's like, you know, this is a difficult conversation to have, and sometimes I want to be really careful with my words, because as a white male, we have been privileged, like, and I can admit that, and it's nothing that I take and I'm proud of. It's something that has been ingrained in my subconscious,
Mhm.
right, through society. And this is more about, if I'm aware of this, what steps can I take to to open up myself into being being less objectified and being more aware to what's going on and taking responsibility for that,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So I would say that as for men have had all the rights. Like, let's be honest about it,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Mhm.
there's always there we've never had a woman president. We've had men dominating. We've been in a cycle in human history where the leaders, where the warriors, were this and that, and women have just been, in essence, like the child bearers.
Right.
And that's all changing. And I say that just more of like a blanketed statement. And I know there's a lot of women CEOs and leaders
Yep.
that are stepping forward, and we
Yep.
need that. And I
Yep.
almost, like, somebody wrote the other day on, like, a meme, is like, we need women to take over. Men have, like, fucked this thing up for centuries,
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
and I would agree to a sense. It's not saying like we need to have a woman president, but it's like we need to have that compassion. We need to have, like, whatever leadership it is the balanced masculine, it is the balanced
Mhm.
feminine.
Mhm.
It's not the ego stroking that we have right now in our leadership in our country. It is not the mine's bigger than yours, or if you do this, like, we have big shiny missiles and guns,
Yeah.
that's those are fear tactics. So I say, like, the men have come late to the party because we haven't been persecuted.
Mhm.
And now I would say maybe in the last decade we have, like, the men that have been called out on their infidelities, or their behind the scenes practices, all the shady stuff going in government.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things that the men have been exposed and there's been some shaming there, and there hasn't really been a lot of rebuttal. There hasn't really been like a man stepping forward, being, oh, maybe Kobe Bryant when it went down with his wife and he was doing infidelity, he did make a public speech. But some men, like they run and hide. They don't actually speak forward. They don't take responsibility.
Yep.
So I think part of it is like men are starting to get persecuted, and I think it's more of a shame aspect because some of the dialogue are men are dogs. They're domineering. They're selfish. They're what's like the like what's the like Tony Stark when he's just like he thinks he's just better than everybody else when you're a narcissist, right?
Yeah,
like
narcissist, yeah.
not I'm knocking Tony Stark. I think Tony Stark's cool shit, but it's like the narcissism, right? Where it's like, it's one thing to be confident and to be positive of yourself. It's another thing to like use that to put others down and to like make people less than. And I think we're at that point where we've seen generations of that, and guys like you and I, like who've experienced that, as far as almost being victimized of like, gosh, like I don't want to show up that way, so how do we start to show up? So I think we have like almost been like secretly hiding in our dark rooms with our buddies in men's groups, like being like, hey, like, are you feeling this way too? Because like I'm feeling a lot of shame and I'm feeling a lot of guilt, and I don't really know how to say this, to my partner or my to the public. So it's almost like we've been kind of doing the work behind the scenes, and I think now is the time. Like now is the time for men to start, speaking up, talking about the experience, doing the healing, and because we don't need another repressed type of person in this planet right now. We don't.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I do feel like it's like if now is not the time, well then all we end up doing is just paying it forward to the next generation or generations until someone there or some generation decides to finally take responsibility. So
Yeah.
that's just not how I live my life in terms of playing below the line or being a victim and passing the buck. I and I think me, a lot of the buddies that I see coming out of the woodworks are not willing to settle for a less than optimal life. It's just figuring out how to create that is a lot easier said than done. That's the challenge.
Totally. And I think it's trial by fire, right? Because none of us got it right. None of us got it perfect. And, I think about the times we are right now, and you and I have done a lot of leadership work, right? And a lot of stepping into our community, stepping into the voice. And I was thinking about this the other day. We're living in a time that's very similar to the 60s. And like, are we ever going to see another John Lennon? Are we ever going to see another Martin Luther King? In our time, is there somebody that we're waiting for to step up? Or is this the time for guys like you and for me and some of the men that are listening to this podcast, and even women that are listening to this podcast? Because we're in a time where information is so, it's in real time, and that we're all developing these like individual leadership qualities that, where the change happens is this it starts with this conversation, and then the ripple effect. It isn't going to be top down. This isn't like, government changing our policies. And I mean, that will get there, but it starts with us.
Yeah.
And it starts with even the protests that are going on right now, like, hey, we've had enough. This is what's showing up. This is like what's not working, and let's move towards what's working. And holding steadfast to that, because this warrior energy that's showing up right now it's protecting and it's defending human rights. It's defending who we are, either as the masculine or the feminine, and it's really about, we've had enough, and this is the time where we're demanding a change. We're demanding transformation. And I think that's what's the powerful part about this, where everybody can show up with that John Lennon, that Martin Luther King, that Gandhi sense of energy, and that we all are making that change.
Yeah, it's about time, but it's the right, because I think we do have all the tools and the awareness that we could ever ask for, and the abundance. I do feel like past generations they're at no fault really, because life was not, I mean, the fact that, again, that we have this, which
Mm.
literally can answer any question I have for
Right.
the most part,
Right.
not the questions of like, how do I seek happiness, or what is
Right.
happiness, but like all
Yeah.
the other things that you can ask Google. Whereas in all other past generations, it's just been a lot more like hand to mouth. It's just
Mm.
survival, because
Yeah.
there's just crazy stuff going on in the world, and live in this time of such human abundance. But then conversely, in such a time of great human sorrow and pain, like we've never been in mass. We've never been as in pain as we are uh, in recordable human history as we are right now. And I think
Yeah.
that's not coincidental, that it's because we have so much abundance,
Mm.
and we have so much information, and we have such little wisdom.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's a big part of this podcast, a lot of the work that I do, which is not so much like, oh, I'm imparting my wisdom to you men. It's like, hey, let's all get together collectively, and and let's see if we can all become wiser by saying what works for you, what has, it's like a mastermind,
Totally.
versus all of us as lone ranger men or
Mm-hmm.
women going through life thinking we're going to have to figure it out. I mean,
Right.
how many friends of mine or family members have I had that a child, and what do they think they're going to figure it out all on their own? No, they'll call mom and dad if that's available, or they'll call other friends, those that have had children ahead of them. Say,
Mm-hmm.
what did you learn? What are your tips? Like that's ultimately, I think, what we do, and then we just have to pass it on, to the future boys and girls of tomorrow, right?
Absolutely, man. And I think at times we forget that, like you
Yeah,
said, the inquisitiveness that we have as children, asking
yeah,
questions, and then we turn to teenager, and then it's like we want to break away.
yeah,
It's like, oh, I got this on myself,
yeah.
and then isn't until we mature,
Mm.
and then we go back, and like I even go back to my parents now and ask them questions and wisdom, but for maybe a good 20 to 30 years, it's
Yeah,
like, no, like I can do this on my own. I
yeah,
don't need you,
yeah, yeah.
and I like the idea we talked about, this mastermind, because it is there is going to be, and this starts now, there is going to be that we're the men can start to match the conversation with the women, so the masculine and the feminine co-creating this paradigm,
Yeah,
because we do need to actually at some point start talking to each other,
yeah, yeah,
with the importance of having our individual work
yeah.
to get the feedback and get the support. And I think what I believe about where we are in these times, and there's a lot of indigenous cultures and talk about where we are as a human species, like this evolution of growth, and that like we all are experiencing this sorrow, we're all experiencing this like pain,
Mhm.
because we have to heal as a collective, masculine and feminine, um, all races, all religions. We have to find this place of ultimate like awareness that we are all one.
Mhm.
As the hippy dippy, like parade around the fire. Like there is a sense of that. Like if you really think about it, we're in the same damn fishbowl.
Right.
We are all human beings. Doesn't matter. There's nothing separates us. We're all flesh and bone.
Mhm.
So I think like if we are at this crux of that human evolution, that awareness that, oh my gosh, like we're literally all in this together.
Mhm.
How can we find that common ground? How do we find that healing and like start shedding the past of the tyranny and the persecution
Mhm.
and the wars and the slavery and all these
Mhm.
things that have really just kept people down, the prisons, some of the laws, like all these things are just constructs, in my opinion, to keep people separated and to
Mhm.
keep people down. And so I think we're at this crucial time of like, how do we uplift each other? How do we really start to grow and like make everybody on this planet a leader, make everybody in this world responsible for their own, um, responsible for their own thoughts
Mhm.
and ways of thinking, so that we can then change through our actions.
Absolutely. And I think, in closing, it does come down to us, of course, each of us individually
Hmm.
taking responsibility, but then collectively, it is like, especially with everything that's going on with BLM, um, rights and movement, it's like it still comes down to white guys deciding to change, and
Yeah.
to change the construct so that it is a level playing field for all people, men and women, right? And I think that's something that we have an opportunity to do, especially living in the United States, because it's like we are all so blessed to live in the United States and to be able to have these conversations and to live free to an extent, although we're also saying that a lot of people aren't living as free
Right.
as you and I are privileged to live. And I think it's us to make that change for everyone. It's not only to allow our Black brothers and sisters to live more on that level playing field, but for all of us, again, just to heal our internal pains and sufferings that we all have dealt with, in our own ways. We all have our own, lineage, so that we can, like I said, prop up the next generation, and let them truly live from a place where they're not only succeeding in life, but they're deeply fulfilled. And I think that's the most important legacy that we could leave.
I love that, man. If I could just say one thing in closing as well, like when you speak freedom, like you did make a point that is relative, right? It can be some people experiencing it and others not. And I think what it comes down to is freedom in the heart and freedom in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we all live in that place without that limiting structure of beliefs or limiting sense of being open, and we are coming from a place of expanded heart and expanded mind, and not being caged by either, that's where true transformation is available, and for us to really connect and to come together as one.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't think of a better way to wrap.
Love it, dude.
Love it, man. Love you, bro.
Love you too, brother.
Thank you for being a part of this. Wookie, who's here saying hello to me. Look, good dog. Thank you guys for listening. Would love to hear your feedback as always. What things do you resonate with? What do you agree with? What don't you agree with? Always looking to level up. So until next time, have an amazing day. Thanks again, brother.
Thanks for having me, brother.